Hello, everyone. We'll get started in another minute or so. Let a few more people arrive. Okay, welcome back. And let's get started with our meditation and our motivation. So go ahead and set up your posture. Allowing your back to be loosely straight and your body to be relaxed. Okay, sorry about that. So go ahead and focus inward, bringing your awareness down to the lower part of your body and releasing any tension, letting any tightness flow away. And then you can bring to mind a positive motivation for engaging in this meditation, in this class. Having a wish, an aspiration to be of greatest benefit to yourself, others, and the world. And then making each action that we do in that direction toward increasing our awareness, increasing our compassion, increasing our wisdom. That by doing this class, we're making our lives meaningful. We're creating purpose for ourselves. And then intending that to have a positive effect in the world. And then I'd like to introduce you to a breathing technique that can help settle, in particular, your energies, so your chi or your prana. This can help calm things down. And when those energies are settled, then the mind finds it easier to slow down and easier to focus. So what you're going to do is, with a clean nose, you're going to plug your right nostril and breathe in through your left nostril, and then plug your left nostril and breathe out through your right nostril. So it goes in through the left, out through the right 3 times, and then we're going to reverse it and go in through the right and out through the left 3 times. And then we're going to go in with both nostrils and then out with both nostrils 3 times. And so when we do this, when we're exhaling through the left side, that actually clears some of the desire, attachment energy. And when we are cleaning out or exhaling through the right side, that clears some of the aggression and the anger energy. So we'll start pressing down on the right nostril and breathing in through the left nostril. And then out through the right. And take nice deep breaths 2 more times. And then we'll switch in through the right, out through the left 3 times. And then nice deep breaths 3 times in through both nostrils and out through both nostrils. And then let your breath return to a normal rhythm. And notice the ease, how everything feels more at ease after doing that exercise. And if you aren't already, bring your focus to the sensations of the breath going in and out at your nose, at your nostrils. And focusing or attending on the breath lightly. Just enough of your attention so that you don't lose track of the whole cycle of the breath. But you don't need to absorb the whole thing. You don't need to tighten in any way. Just hold it lightly. Stay with it and let the rest of the mind relax. Releasing any thoughts, any disturbances, and just riding, allowing the mind to ride the rhythm of the breath. And then noticing the stillness and the calmness that meditation brings, and how that's a comfortable feeling. And then bringing yourself out of the meditation slowly. So I want to do some review from yesterday. So yesterday we talked about karma and how karma is based on the idea of cause and effect, in the sense that when consciousness is present, when intention is present, we create causes in our minds with certain intentions, with certain actions, to have certain types of experiences. And this is based on this concept that when cause and effect comes into play, that like causes like. So we talked about the apple seed causing an apple tree, that they are similar, and that an apple seed cannot cause a watermelon plant. So in the sense of karma, the intentions that we have put, if they're virtuous, kind intentions, then we receive positive, pleasurable experiences. And if they're negative, harmful intentions and actions, then we receive suffering. And in order for this whole karmic process to exist, mind is required, because the seed has to be imprinted on the mind in order for the experience to happen in the future. And the results of any why any particular situation exists, or any experience happens, or any result comes, is a very complex process. So of course the karmic seeds that we carry in our mind are always part of that situation, but there is also the necessity of the conditions coming together, the external conditions coming together. And just like the growing of an apple tree requires so many different conditions, that's true for every experience that we have as well. And then we talked about the ways in which karma results. It results in the experiences that we have. So if we create certain experiences for others, then we experience those same experiences. So if we're mean to others, others will be mean to us. And then the second way is in the habits that we create. So when we do certain actions, we create the karma to continue to do those same actions. Or if we think in certain ways we continue to think in those same ways unless we create habits to think in other ways or to act in different ways. Okay, and that momentum, getting a new habit started, is difficult because of the karma that we've created to act in the opposite way. So it just takes a little bit more effort, but once you start acting in the way that you want to, then you get like the ball rolling. The other two ways in which karma ripens is the environment we live in and the realm we are born into. Okay, so some other characteristics of karma that we talked about: that positive only leads to positive and negative to negative. You can't have the opposite. That the results are always larger than the cause, that the karmic, even a small karmic action and intention, if it's nurtured by other positive conditions, such as other actions that are positive, then the results can be very big. And that karma grows and increases over time. And then we won't experience the result unless the cause is created. So if we don't create the cause to have positive experiences in our lives, then we won't experience positive things. It's not just chance, it's not just random. Okay, and then that karmic seeds, once they're planted, imprints don't disappear unless they are purified. And then we talked about purification and the four opponent powers. So these are the aspects, the ways in which we can think that create a hostile environment for these karmic seeds that we've already planted. So if we've done a negative action in our lives and we don't want to experience the suffering from that, then we practice in meditation these four opponent powers. So the first one is regret. So we wish we didn't do the actions. The second one is reliance, and we rely on our spiritual supports, whether it's the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, whether it's some other kind of spiritual path. We rely on them to support them to continue to do better. We remind them ourselves of that support so that our minds are filled more with virtue and positive actions. Then the remedy or the antidote, we can do something opposite to the action that we have done. We can also get in touch with our own pure Buddha nature, and that also becomes a remedy for any negative actions that we've done. And then the resolution, and that's the decision not to do the action again. So we also make a commitment or a promise that we're not going to engage in the same action again, and that also creates this opposite, oppositional attitude in our minds for that suffering karma. So today, get a little more. So what I wanted to talk about today is this sense that we're starting to look at what we often take for granted. One of the things that we often take for granted is that there is some external, objective, true, factual world that is out there, that exists in a certain way. And then there is a mind that is in here that is perceiving it. Okay. And the mind that is in here that is perceiving it is creating an accurate or correct representation of what exists out there. Okay, so we walk around as if the way in which we see things, the way in which we perceive things, is actually how they are. Okay, and then we also have this notion that what we make up in our minds, okay, when we have imagine things, that is not real. Okay, that is complete fantasy, and that has nothing to do with this external reality. Okay, so this is what we're going to do now is we're going to start to blur that line that is between this external objective reality and this internal subjective reality. Okay, because we have a sense that there's this clear like wall almost between those two things, between what the reality of our mind and the reality of, you know, objective factual existent out there. Okay, so one example of this, we'll look at the next slide, is when we start looking at perception and how we perceive things. So please be patient with my drawing. I'm not a drawing person, but I think you can see. So here we go. All right, I think you can still get the idea, even though it's like a cartoon. Okay, so this is a flower, right? And these little things are photons, okay, which are light particles or waves that go into my eye. That's an eye, okay? And then once they go into the eye, what happens is these photons stimulate certain nerves, you know, the cones and rods in my retina, okay? Cells in the back of my eye that create certain neurochemical reactions in my brain, okay? And then somehow through those chemical reactions in my brain, oops, how did that happen? Ah, sorry. Maybe I got too excited and clicked too many times. All right, so there's a brain. You see that thing as a brain. Um, so certain neurochemical reactions happen in my brain, and then this big thought bubble here is my mind. And I get an image of a flower in my mind, okay? And now these arrows are actually what my mind does to that image in order to be able to interact with it, okay? Sometimes it's positive and it's helpful what my mind does to that image, and sometimes it's not, okay? So what we learned was that in a few days ago when we were talking about impermanence, the constantly changing nature of things, these photons, okay, this light that is bouncing off of this flower and that is hitting my eye is actually reflects the constantly changing nature of things, okay? The fact that we know that the flower is wilting moment to moment, okay? It's aging just like us, moment to moment. And my eye can detect that, okay? But when it gets to my brain, in order for me to interact with that image of a flower, I actually make it permanent. I make it unchanging. And then this arrow along the bottom here, okay, that takes us back to the flower, then I project onto the flower permanence, unchanging nature, because I believe that this image that I have created in my mind is an accurate picture of how the flower out here actually exists. So this whole process, of course, takes very quickly, right? Our minds work very quickly. And because we've never been able to actually see the constantly changing nature of the flower, of course we believe that the flower exists permanently as unchanging until over time we see that it has changed, and then our reason comes in. So one of these arrows comes in and says, oh no, flowers are changing, flowers change, and then we know that the flower has changed. But for us, it appears to us to be permanent. Okay, so this can often mess us up. Okay, so one of the ways in which it creates problems for us, this perception, is that we can, those little arrows that we do to things, we can, our minds are so good and they are so complex that they can put onto external things lots of elaborations, okay? Lots of interpretations. We can tell stories in our minds about situations and create, you know, for example, we're going to talk today about anger. We create anger based on our interpretation of the situation, and then we do that arrow underneath, we project onto the situation all those negative aspects that we have come up with in our mind. So anger exaggerates the negative aspects of any situation. It can be a person, it can be suffering, it can be an idea, okay? And when we exaggerate the negative aspects, we feel like we cannot tolerate the situation or the object or the person. So we get angry. We want to push the person away. We want to get rid of it. We want to change the situation. And we've put it all on that external thing that we say is causing my anger, okay? And wishes harm or to get away from the situation. So what happens is, let's say, for example, someone walks in here and they start insulting me. Okay, they start getting angry at me, telling me what a horrible teacher I am, and maybe they're even someone that I cared for, you know, that was a friend of mine or something, but they got really mad for some reason about something that I did. Okay, so my mind, I have this negative feeling, right, from what they're saying. I really, what I'm hearing, I mean, all I'm actually experiencing are sound waves, right? There's sound waves coming out of this person's you know, mouth. Their throat is making sound waves. But in my mind, I start giving meaning to the words. I start interpreting their body language from what I see. I start connecting it to this sense of self that gets offended, that gets upset, that feels like it's harmed by these things. I start exaggerating, saying the person is such a horrible person because they're saying these things. And then I start exaggerating even more, and I start thinking about all the possible past ways in which they have harmed me. Or I start looking for ways that they're a bad person, that they're messed up in some way, they don't have a good life, or they don't act right all the time. And I build and build and build and build this anger. And then I say, that person made me angry. Okay. But when I start to look more carefully at it, what I see is that it's my mind that has built this whole narrative around this simple action and this particular situation. Okay. And if that situation was angry in and of itself, somehow, again, separate from my mind, okay, if that situation of that person saying those things was an inherently anger producing situation, then everyone who heard those words would get angry. Okay. And that doesn't happen. Somebody else looking on who doesn't know me, doesn't know that person, wouldn't necessarily get angry. They might be curious, they might be interested, maybe they have some compassion, you know, but they aren't going to get necessarily angry. So my belief that somehow that person and their actions are inherently anger producing is not true. It actually requires my mind to interpret it in a certain way. Okay. So if I want to decrease my anger, because what happens is that when I get angry, then I often make the situation worse, don't I? I start yelling back. I start talking about that person behind their back. I start, rejecting that person. Or I get angry at myself and I think I'm a horrible person and they're right and I stink as a teacher and, all these things, okay? These ways in which we react. And we don't necessarily have to go there, okay? Because when we react in those ways, it's because we feel like the situation is completely out of our control, that it is somehow something that is being done to us externally that we have no participation in. But in fact, it's our own mind's interpretation and perception of the situation that is causing us to react so strongly, to create this anger in our minds. And so if we can learn to think differently about those situations, to look at anger as what it actually is, then we don't have to react so strongly. We can react in very different ways. Okay. And then that in turn makes the situation something different. It becomes a situation in which I can learn. Maybe I can learn to be open to their feedback. Maybe it can be a situation in which I can solve the problem constructively and thereby deepen my relationship with that person. It can be a situation in which I can learn to be kind to people who harm me, which increases my love and my kindness and my compassion. I can learn to see the suffering in that person. So the situation, I mean, there's so many different ways that I can work with that situation that doesn't bring on anger. It brings on strength. It brings on skillful means. It brings on compassion, brings on loving kindness. It brings on patience. Okay. So how it's, and it's so much, becomes so much more within my control. Okay. Because so often we feel like we have to fix the external situation, like we have to get rid of this person from our lives and bring all these nice people in. And but the fact is that we cannot fix every situation in the world that is going to cause us suffering. We just don't have that power. We don't have that control. But we do have us, we can work with our minds. Okay. So let's look at some of the antidotes to anger. So the first of the two antidotes that we think about with anger, the first one is patience. So patience is the calm, peaceful state of mind that can bear hardship or harm without getting upset. And the second one is loving kindness. So loving kindness that wants others to be happy, right? And we cannot want to harm others at the same time as we love them and want them to be happy. So the first one is the sense that when difficult situations come into my life, okay, when I see people hurting others, when I see someone hurting me, when I am suffering, getting sick, when things aren't going the way that I want them to, then my response is to have a calm mind, to have a mind that can be present with those difficult emotions, with that difficult situation, without having it disturb my mind, without on top of it creating this anger, this afflictive emotion that wants to reject and retaliate, get back at the person or the thing, that wants to hurt myself, all those ways in which we can create a disturbing state of mind in response to difficult situations. If instead I learn to respond to difficult situations in a different way with a calm mind, that is patience. Okay. And then loving kindness, when someone harms me, if I have already, and if I even focus on my wish for them to be happy, then I'm not going to try. I'm going to be more compassionate. I'm going to be more understanding. I'm going to be more patient because I don't want to hurt them in return. Okay. But we have to look at, where this harm is coming from and how we're looking at it. So some other antidotes. We can think about the disadvantages, disadvantages of being angry. Okay. We can think about that. We can, in general, we can maintain a relaxed and happy mind. So a mind that in general has a positive outlook, that practices gratitude, that, sees the cup as half full, that practices meditation, that doesn't react to situations automatically. Okay. Then we can also know our triggers. So what situations are those that make us, that get us going, that really push our buttons. And then when we get in those situations, when we start to recognize, oh, when this person starts to act in this way, I start to get angry, then I immediately can respond differently. I can say, okay, this is how they act, right? And I don't have to get pulled into it. Okay. We can remember the positive aspects of difficult people and situations. Like we already talked about, there are opportunities to develop compassion. There are opportunities to develop patience. And then we can also recognize how our mind creates the experience of anger. So let's go into each one of these a little bit more closely. So thinking about some of the disadvantages, we can, okay. So we can recognize that when we get angry, the blood actually rushes away from our problem-solving parts of our brain. It goes into the emotional structures of our brain, and it even goes away from our head and into our hands, like fight or flight or freeze, those kinds of reactions. So the more angry we get, actually, the less we have the ability to respond in an effective way to actually solve the problem, to actually stop the person from doing what they're doing, to set boundaries in a way that the person can hear. Okay. So if we get angry and we react, we're less effective in our relationships in dealing with those situations. Okay. So this is a major disadvantage of allowing ourselves to our anger to increase. Okay. Another one is that, it affects our health, right? Increases our blood pressure. We end up doing things like increases our stress, right? We feel out of control. Another thing is that when we lose our temper, we often do things that we're really embarrassed about later, right? We say mean things to people, and then we feel horrible that we said something mean because it got out of control, or we're sarcastic, or we talk about someone behind their back, and then, and then that creates all sorts of problems because then the person hears about it, and then they don't want, it's like it just destroys relationships. Anger, just can really ruin friendships. It's really hard. You know how hard it is for people to forgive. And so if you don't want to have to worry about someone forgiving you, then don't create the causes for them to have to forgive you. Okay. So there are a lot of disadvantages, and I'm sure you can go over them too, of getting angry. And then having a relaxed, happy mind helps us to keep that equanimity, keep that stability, even in the face of difficult situations. I talked a little bit about knowing our triggers, knowing what gets to us. Sometimes when people are really annoying, it isn't necessarily about them, but it's about something inside of us that we have a difficulty accepting or dealing with. Okay. So I had a friend who I worked with who was very good at pleasing our boss. Okay, so they were always, you know, bringing them a cup of tea and, you know, telling them how great they are, and you know, just really sort of, what do we call it, sucking up to the boss. And yet, I mean, they were good at their job, and their relationship with my boss didn't have anything to do with me. I had a fine relationship with my boss too, but somehow it really, that tendency to want to please people really annoyed me. And so I had to start to look at my own, what is it about that in me that is so difficult? You know, is there something in me that I haven't admitted to? Like maybe I do that too. You know, maybe I act in that way, but I don't accept that. I feel like that's not the way you're supposed to be, and but I actually do that. And so when I see it in someone else, it triggers me and it bugs me, like in an exaggerated way. Like I could notice it and then be, oh, that, you know, I don't really like that, and that's kind of stupid. But no, it's when it like sort of eats at you. You know what I'm talking about? Like when it really bothers you. Usually it's something that's in you, especially if it's not directly affecting you, right? It's just something you see and you notice, okay? So knowing, I had to know my triggers. I had to recognize when this person was around me. How could I, you know, how could I be kind to this person? How could I be, you know, compassionate toward this person instead of letting my annoyance get in the way? And then I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. You know, I didn't like feeling annoyed. It doesn't feel good. I didn't like having that barrier between me and that person. So we talked about some of the positive aspects of difficult people and situations. When we were talking about karma, when you experience a suffering situation, like a sickness, or like all of us, you know, being, you know, shut in our houses, these difficult experiences, we're actually burning off some of the negative karma that we've created. So we are actually getting rid of negative karmic seeds in our, that have been planted on our mind stream. And so we can actually feel good about that. Now that's done, you know, I don't have to experience that suffering anymore. I'm finished with that. Okay, so that's one way we can look at it. We can also look at it as an opportunity to to uh, to learn, right? To develop compassion, to develop loving kindness, because it's easy to love and be patient and be kind to people who are nice to us, right? When people do things that are nice to us, you know, we feel gratitude and we like them. But when people are mean to us, or when they're frustrating, or when they're annoying, and then we still have to develop loving kindness, and we still have to develop compassion for them, then it works our heart muscles. It works our compassion muscles. It makes our compassion and our loving kindness stronger, okay, when they challenge us in this way. Okay, and then the last one, we started off talking about how our mind creates the experience of anger, how our mind exaggerates the negative aspects of situations, and then responds based on that exaggeration, because every situation has both positive and negative aspects. So that person that walked in, you know, probably has something really positive to say, but if I'm only focusing on how horrible they're being and how they're, you know, criticizing me and how I can't tolerate that, then I'm not going to be able to hear or see any of the positive aspects. Okay, I think that's all I want to say for now. We'll talk a little more about this tomorrow, how this process happens, how we do this projection and this perception thing. So if you have questions, we can do some of that now.
Okay, I'm going to start by unmuting Sarah Schaffer. You're not muted.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. So I've got a question about, so I understand the antidotes you mentioned towards anger, that patience and loving kindness would help. but how do you effectively do that if, say, like, you already kind of feel anxious and, you know, it's not very easy to kind of love the person that annoys you? So then you would then say, try and at least be patient with them. But how do you do that if, like, you know, like when you physically sort of feel like really, oh, you know,
Yeah.
what do you actually do?
Yeah. So you start always with mindfulness, with an awareness of what is that experience of anger. Where do you feel it in your body? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your shoulders? Do you feel it in your hands? Where is the feeling? And then be present with it. Okay, so we're not suppressing it and we're not running away from it. We're actually observing it and getting in touch with the fact that there is a mind that is observing, and there is an emotion that is being observed. Okay, so often what happens with anger is that it can be so overwhelming, and any negative emotion can be so overwhelming that we think that it's something that is a part of us that we can't get away from. And so having the experience of seeing that it is just as impermanent as everything else, it comes and it goes and it changes, allows us, getting that distance allows it to release, allows it, first of all, the physical feeling to just let go. Okay, it's not a matter that we're getting it out. Okay, so like yelling into a pillow or punching or something doesn't, I'm not talking about that kind of letting go. I'm talking about being with the experience and seeing that just like any experience, it ends, it stops, it moves. Okay, so that's the first thing we have to do, is get that distance between the feeling and the mind. And then from there, then we can start to analyze, what are the thoughts that are contributing to that experience? What kinds of beliefs am I having about the person that are creating these negative feelings inside of me? And then, are those attitudes, are those beliefs really true? Like, is it really true that I can't possibly tolerate this situation? Okay. Is that really true? What am I believing here, that that it's a horrible, horrible, horrible that they are acting in this way? And if they don't stop acting in this way, then I am just going to explode. Okay. Sometimes that's a belief that we have that we can't, and then we question that belief. Is that really true? Is there anything that I can do that will allow me to be more tolerant of this situation, to be more comfortable when they act the way that they do? Is there a way that I can interpret what they're doing in a way that increases my compassion, increases my loving kindness? So they talk about, like, if someone is hitting you, let's say they're hitting you with a bat. Okay, it's kind of an extreme example, but that's what they use. They're hitting you with a bat. Do you get angry at the bat, or do you get angry, or do you want to affect and change the person who is wielding the bat? Okay, in the same way, we can see that the person who is harming you, it's not the person, but their afflictive emotion, their ignorance and their anger that is causing them to do what they're doing. So you can want to change their afflictive emotion and still care about the person. So His Holiness talks about forgiveness is for the person, not necessarily for the action. Okay, so we can set limits on the action and still have love for the person. Okay, so that's a start.
So that means, like, when you're at the point where you're kind of just overwhelmed and you can't think clearly, like when you said, like, the blood's rushing out of your head and that sort of moment, you just sit there and feel it. Even if it feels painful, you just kind of observe that painful feeling until it kind of calms down.
Yes. And if you can't get away from the person, Shantideva talks about, you're like like a piece of wood. You don't say anything and you don't do anything. Okay, even if you can't change your mind right in that moment, you don't say anything and you don't do anything. You become a block of wood until you can get out of the situation and then go work with it some.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I will unmute now. Emma, you can ask your question.
Hi, Emma.
Hello. My question kind of links to that last one. I'm going to put it in a business setting. So in a business setting, I do lots of networking, and there are people there who definitely don't align with my values, and I can feel that that triggers me. So I've tried to deal with it with them, like to see where the unrest is. And then in the end, I end up choosing to leave the situation because that brings me more peace. And I think at the time that's the right thing to do. But now listening to today's lesson, is it better for me to stay and try and accept it more somehow?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? That's very clear.
Sure, I think so. Sometimes we do have to remove ourselves from situations that cause too much disturbance to our minds. So if it is such to the point that it's creating more harm for you, then it is good to get out of the situation. If you can slowly, well, and then we work on it in meditation, right? We work on it in the cushion. We bring to mind those people that trigger us, and we start to think differently about them and about their situation. I know one thing that really bothered me a lot was I always felt I would get angry when people didn't follow the rules or follow laws, you know, things like this, that they would cut corners. And that was, like you said, I like the way you put it when you said they don't align with my values. And I had this really strong belief that people should be this way. People should be law abiding. People should follow the rules. And it was a really strong belief in me that people should be a certain way. And it's like, why, right? Why should they be the way that I think they should be? That you know, it doesn't really make any sense. Just because it's a law doesn't mean everyone should follow it. Okay,
For
so
me, this is
yeah.
more about like unfairness. Like fairness is a big value of mine. So but then I think it might negatively impact on my business because I'm not in a setting where I could grow my business. So I feel like it does negatively impact on me, but it also brings me more peace at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Getting out of the situation decreases your ability to do your business, which is probably beneficial for others in some way. So um, uh, then, like I said, working on the cushion with this belief about fairness and unfairness, you know, and starting to see that when other people have different values, it's because one, we can have compassion for them sometimes because their values may be related to ignorance. Okay, so it's starting to be able to be tolerant, more tolerant, and be able to be present with those people without being overwhelmed with the angry feelings. Okay, and how we do that is we start to shift how we think about those people, because there may be some labeling that you are doing that if this person is unfair, therefore they are a bad person, something like that. And then you want to reject them and you want them to go away. When in fact, although they may be unfair, maybe there are some other positive qualities that they have that you could focus on, right? Unfortunately, they do have this negative quality. They act unfairly. And you understand that they're doing that out of ignorance. They don't know better. If they knew better, they would know to be fair, and that would create more happiness for them, right? It's more ethical, and ethics benefits themselves. okay? But they're not there yet. So you can have compassion for them and understanding and see their positive qualities, and then you can relate to them on your shared positive qualities, and that improves your relationship with them. It can maybe also rub off on them in positive ways if it's not, again, if it's not too overwhelming, right? And you're not going out there and trying to change them. You're just simply being yourself and loving and accepting them from their point of view.
Okay. So to stay would benefit me more in the long run if I could then accept that more and
Yes.
grow that part of me.
Yes.
Okay. So leaving is not always the good thing. I think I'm doing the right thing, because I think my peace is maintained if I think, okay, I can't change you, and I'm not going to try and change you. So what I can control is I can change me, whether I'm in this situation.
Yeah. And one thing that was hard for me that I had to learn to do is learn to be, while I'm standing there with someone, sitting there in a meeting or something, is to get in touch with what is happening inside of me. What feelings am I having while that person is in my presence? And then that helps me, that awareness helps me stay calm, helps me stay loving. So you have to step back for a moment while you're interacting and still be present with yourself, because you have a strong heart, you have a loving, kind heart, and you can get in touch with that even when you're in the presence of someone else.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, now I'll unmute Stasia.
Yes.
And now
Hello.
ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I wanted to ask, what if you're the one that hurt someone, not in purpose, like you said, like triggered someone to feel bad or to think something that, as you said before, like what if you are the cause of this anger in like the other person?
Okay. So have you asked for their forgiveness? Have you apologized?
I'm asking like what I understand what I can do if I feel those things, how I can work with that, like how I can help the other person not having all those negative thoughts and like what you said, all these things that we are building in our minds.
Yeah, it's really hard to change other people. Always the first thing that you can do if you want someone else to change is working on yourself, being a good role model, okay? The second thing is that if they're open to you talking to them about what happened, not in a way that is blaming of them, but in a way that is that, there's a whole system. Maybe you've heard of Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication. He has a book about nonviolent communication. Have you heard of it?
I heard, yeah.
Yeah. So it uses these I statements, that these I statements like, I feel very rejected, in our relationship. And I really would like to talk about what it is that happened. So you don't put all the blame on the other person, but you take responsibility for your own feelings. And then you ask for them. Okay, so at first make this I statement, I feel rejected, I feel hurt by your anger. I would, would you please talk to me about it so we can resolve it, right? And then, but then when you ask them, when you make that request, it has to be in a way that if they choose not to, you still have to accept it, right? Even if they can't go there, you just have to be present with them. And so you approach them in a way that is open and caring and accepting, and then it leaves room and space for them to be more calm about things and more open and more accepting.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, sure.
You want to do one more, Venerable?
Yes.
Okay, I will unmute Vishal. You can now ask your question.
Okay, hi. Can you listen?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So good to see you.
You too. I like your background.
Yeah, I just changed it. I was playing with it. So some people are really smart ones, you know, and they always gain some benefit out of a condition by compromising with their ethics. So being with such people, you would find that by and large you are at a loss. So and then, you know, it's not okay to always lose the friendship if there is, right? So how to deal with such people who always have this um, you know, way of just getting some benefit out of things, even if they have to compromise with their ethics. Are they really happy by compromising their ethics?
Maybe temporarily, you know, maybe they get some temporary sense pleasure, but in the long run, it ends up hurting them. And yeah, you would have to know their minds to know what, you know, what if if they have a conscience that bothers them. They may have a conscience. They may, sometimes when people feel like they have to constantly get things from others, it's because they have a lot of fear of not having enough themselves. But what ends up happening with a lot of those people is that if they use people only for what they get, and if they're constantly cheating people, they end up very isolated and very alone. And that also, it ends up reversing. You know, they want to be happy and they don't want suffering, but they're going about it in a way that is creating actually more suffering. And we all do that in some ways. We don't necessarily do it in exactly the same way, but all of us pursue things that are, you know, are not particularly skillful or not particularly wise. And so we can have compassion for that person, recognizing that the way in which they're going about trying to be happy is really going to cause a lot of suffering for them. It's really going to end up, you know, alienating their friends. Their friends won't be around them, you know, and it doesn't, eventually it doesn't make a peaceful and calm mind.
Okay. I have one more question. Can I ask?
Sure.
So I wanted to ask this yesterday when we had more time, but I just didn't get my chance. So it's about this very subject of loneliness. So, you know, sometimes there is a very thin boundary between the solitude versus the loneliness. So sometimes we opt for solitude but find that loneliness after some time. So and if somebody gets stuck in a situation where they don't have a choice and they have to accept to be lonely, then how to deal with it?
Well, from a Buddhist point of view, loneliness is based on a view of the self that is somehow separate from everyone else. So it's a view of that we are not connected to others, even if we don't see. You know, I can go, you know, a whole day without seeing any person at all, and not be lonely, because I know that I'm connected to so many other beings, simply because that's how I exist. Right? So starting to emphasize how we are connected to others. One thing that they talk about in meditation that you can do is, like, when you have a headache, and you can apply this to any suffering and even loneliness, you can apply this to loneliness. When we're lonely, we remember all the other beings in the world who are also experiencing loneliness as well. and we can connect with them and say to ourselves that if I have to experience loneliness, may it be a cause for no one else to be lonely. Okay, so it's like taking on the suffering, and we're doing it in meditation, of course, and we're visualizing it, but it actually ends up connecting us to others in a very positive ways, and then we don't feel lonely. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting way in which we can. The other thing is, you know, becoming your own best friend, learning to be, you know, that you enjoying your own company. That's another thing that I've done a lot too.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you very
Yes. So let's do some meditation.
All right, so everyone, let's go back to comfortable position, please. Find yourself grounded and stable. Give yourself a moment to relax. And allowing the bell to bring you into the space of the body first, as we usually do. Going all the way down to where your body meets the cushion, the chair, or the floor. For a moment, settling down. Allowing the awareness to become grounded and stable. And then bring in your awareness to the entire space of the body, connecting with this realm of physical sensations. And breathing deeply in order to expand the areas of tension, and exhaling, releasing the tension, allow it to dissolve and to leave the body with the breath. Relaxing, letting go. And then just take a moment to experience your body in its natural state, a state of balance, dynamic equilibrium. No need to do much, simply be with the body as it is. And then we let go of observing the body. Simply let your body rest. And bring the attention into the space of the mind. So in order to meditate on the disadvantages of anger and some antidotes. Let's start by reflecting on some of your own experiences. Try to bring examples from your own life, making this meditation more personal, more realistic, in order to examine if anger is destructive or if it's useful. Try to remember a situation in which you got angry. And the point is not to trigger the anger once more, but rather to recall how this situation went and how it felt. With this recollection of the event, you can start to analyze certain aspects of what happened and how it felt. And you can start by asking yourself if you're happy when you're angry. Is it possible that you can experience positive state of mind while anger is present in your mind stream? And consider in this situation where anger arose, can you connect it to other instances in your life? Perhaps on the type of situations in which you become angry or the people with whom you get angry. Try to analyze what effect this pattern has in your own life. And can you recall what happens with your communication skills when you become angry? Is it the case that you can communicate with others effectively? Or perhaps you lash out at people when you're angry? Or maybe withdraw, keep quiet, and try to suppress it? Do you think those are skillful means of communication? And think about the effect of your actions on others. Do you think your anger brings about the happiness that you desire? Does it help you get close to others? Or is it actually separating you more? And after an episode of anger, later when you're calm, how do you feel about what you said, what you did when you were angry? Is there a sense of shame, guilt, or loss of self-esteem? So seeing that anger and resentment destroy your own and others' happiness, turn to right, try to apply some antidotes to subdue it. For example, if you get criticized, you can analyze what the person is saying to you, whether or not what the other person says is true. If what the other person says happens to be true, then there's no reason to get angry. You both know it's a fact, and so you can simply acknowledge it, make note of it. On the other hand, if somebody blames you for something you didn't do, then what's the need for anger? It is as if the person said that you have horns on your head, something that you know is ridiculous and is just not true. So what need is there to be angry? And while experiencing a difficult situation, which perhaps a lot of you are right now in this context, when feeling uneasy, irritated, or agitated, you can ask yourself, is there something I can do about it? If the answer is yes, then anger is certainly out of place, because there's a solution to this problem. You can do something to improve the situation. So anger is not helpful, it's actually a hindrance. But in case there's nothing you can do about the situation, in case you have no control or no power over this circumstance, then anger is useless as well, because it is out of your control. You simply need to accept that. Getting angry will only harm yourself and will not improve the situation one bit. So what need is there to be angry? And in a situation where you happen to have an argument or a fight with a person, you can examine how he got involved in this situation. And you can start by analyzing what are the things that you said or did to disagree. Often when we're angry, we think that we're in the right and that it's entirely the other person's fault that this argument happened. But is that really the case? Could you perhaps try to put yourself in the perspective of the other person? Examining in this way helps you understand why the other person is also upset. And when dealing with a difficult person, you can accept and understand that perhaps this is not the way in which they act all the time. Each one of us at any given point can react with anger or be under the influence or the control of destructive emotions. Things such as jealousy, pride, attachment. So thinking how a disagreeable person is also suffering, also under the control of these destructive emotions. Instead of becoming angry at them, you can give rise to compassion. So seeing how anger robs you of your peace of mind, it makes us act in ways that are detrimental to ourselves and others. Try to set a strong intention to recognize it, and to the best of your ability, apply this antidote to counteract it. Slowly and gently coming out of the meditation, we move on to the dedication. May all beings everywhere, plagued by suffering of body and mind, obtain a notion of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and find repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective. All can quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, to dispel the mysteries of the world.
Okay, just wanted to say a quick thing about analytic meditation, that analytic meditations are something that you have to do repeatedly over and over in order to have an effect. So you won't necessarily, the first time you do an analytic meditation, see, a strong change in your mind. It's through familiarity, getting used to seeing situations in a different way, that analytic meditation works. Okay, thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.